So I go back, and this time we've been rehearsed. We go into the room, and both of us have to maintain our certain positions, right? But at least we can do it in some way that can be mutually productive. So I go in and sit down, and Don says, Sandy. I say, yes, Don. Are you ready for surgery? I say, yes. We smiled at each other and got up and shook hands. And that was how I wound up sitting up on the gurney outside that operating room, where fortunately I did go in and they did put me, as we say, to sleep, which is not the way anesthetics work. And I had the opportunity to experience that for myself. By the way, I don't ordinarily talk while I'm sitting on the edge of a table this high. It makes me swing my legs. I will try not to do that. There are a lot of little stories that take us on the way, on the path to one definition of gender and performance or another. And I'm not going to go around on that. I was going to tell you about a certain cat, but I've been asked not to. So I'm going to do certain other things along the way. One of the things that I wanted to do is make a stop at language and unintelligibility. We have a thing going in the ACLAB called the Near Legibility Project, which is based upon the idea that we, as machines that absolutely must make pattern out of anything we can, that's our main drive is to make patterns, we'll make patterns out of almost anything, so when we're given something which is juicy and tasty, we will immediately make something coherent out of it. Gestalt psychology, in short. But what happens if you get very, very close to the point? Because what happens if you deliberately give someone a random pattern that you manipulate in such a way that it begins to approach something upon which someone could legitimately gain closure and actually read a real pattern out of it? But what happens is, as you approach that point, the point at which you near closure but don't quite get there, and this is the closest thing I know of to philosophical quietus interruptus. The closer you get, the more the drive for closure increases. And the drive for closure in humans is an almost sexual thing. It's one of our deepest survival instincts. It's one of the closest drives to sex and death combined that we have. So as the person approaches closure, you change the pattern so that closure is no longer available. And you continue doing that. You dance at the edge of intelligibility. And as you do that, what you are doing in traditional art theoretical terms is you are producing a space of transition. It's a space in which for a moment time has stopped, the instant before closure is completed. And in that instant before closure, if you look very closely, you can see that what's happened is that the fabric of reality has opened up in very funny ways. And all the various discourses in all their shapes and sizes have now turned into little structures with nuts and bolts on them. And if you work very, very quickly, you can unscrew the nuts and bolts. And you can start rearranging reality closer to your own heart's desire, which is, after all, when you stop to think about it, what transgender is all about. Playing at that edge, the liminal edge, the transitional edge, the threshold of something else, and finding ways to prolong that experience of lack of closure. I experienced that quite directly one day coming out of my store. I used to have a store on the mall in Santa Cruz. And at the very beginning of transition, I came out of the store and our dear President Ronald Reagan had just closed all the mental institutions in California, and all those people having nowhere to go were on the street. And so I walk out, and there's a guy there, I guess in his late teens, early 20s, sitting on a flower pot, and I walk out, and one of the characteristics of paranoid schizophrenia is that some paranoid schizophrenics are extremely sensitive to the signals given off by other people. Overly sensitive. It's also characteristic of some forms of autism. Oversensitivity. You lack the control for your input. So I come bopping out of the store, and this guy looks at me and an expression of utter terror comes over his face. And he says, "What the fuck are you?" I'm just out here to pick up the milk. So instead of that, I say, find out, which unfortunately just makes him a little nutty. He says, I don't know what you are, man. You make my head hurt. I can't figure out what you are. I think, oh, closure. We got a problem with closure here. And this is something that we might be able to use. And of course, later, one of the things I did was, you cannot always talk to the mole people because they're not always able to talk back. But some you can. There was one guy who, for the entire length of time that my store was open, which was quite a few years, would walk back and forth on the mall every day, mumbling to himself, enormous beard, and big bushy hippie type hair, and old tattered clothing, and he would catch imaginary flies in front of him, and he would mumble to himself, and we all knew him in the sense that he was there, and you didn't interrupt his discourse with himself, and you gave him space. One day, I was walking down the mall, and I passed this guy in a suit, clean cut, clean shaven looking guy, and after I went by, I said, my God, it's Jerry! And I backed up, and it was the same guy. And I couldn't help invading his social space. I just blurted out, what the hell happened to you? He said, oh, man, my parents came to town. So here we are. So I've been playing with identity for a while. One of the things I do is I'm going to have to digress into how I construct my pedagogical discourse, and which is to say that I try to deconstruct it as it goes along, so that apparently I don't have one. In fact, what I've been doing is making installation work, and I wanted to run by a few seconds of one of those to give you a sample of kinds of things I'm into. This is a piece called Identity, and it's actually an endless loop, and for the sake of entropy, we won't show it all. But I'll show you a minute or two of this thing. It's about the things that I've been talking about so far. And let's see. No, I was thinking significant sound. I've got such wonderful help. And I'm not particularly going to talk about this at first. Let's just mention.